Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. At long last, here I am with my review of John Boyne's BookTube prize-winning A Ladder to the Sky. Are you sitting on the edge of your seat? So let me cut to the chase. I absolutely hated this book. I hated everything about this book. But before I go on my rant, let me talk for a few minutes about an interesting topic to me and very relevant to this review, which is that 99% of the people who've read this book, who I know, who I respect, who judged the BookTube prize, loved it or really liked it. Okay, everybody that I associate with has given it a 4 or a 5-star rating and spoken very highly, if not glowingly, about it. So that's fascinating. I, again, will repeat my half-baked maxim, which is that we all read different books when we read the same book. So I am probably going to get a little ranty in this review. If you love this book, if this is a book near and dear to your heart, I certainly mean no disrespect to your reading tastes or your appreciation for the book, as I will in a minute or two go on to completely rip it to shreds. Alright, so if you don't want to watch that, don't. But I just think it's fascinating how different our experiences of literature can be. So this was one where the minority opinion that I am aligning myself with 100% is with Britta Bowlers. She hated it too. And I did this as my very first buddy read with Greg, supposedly fun, and we both hated it, and that's all I'm going to say about his opinion. I'm sure he will be commenting on it at length on his own channel. But this is my opinion, so fasten your seatbelts. The biggest flaw of this novel was that the characters were paper thin. They were just so plastic and devoid of any nuance, any layering, that I was bored from page 1. Everything was a cliche. Maurice, some people said they hated him. Some people said that he was a likable rogue. He was so nothing. There was nothing to him for me. There was nothing to grab onto. Very little of what anybody did in this novel made any sense because there was no fleshed out characters with which to make sense of the bizarre things that happened in the book. And this is an insight that I'm stealing from Greg with attribution, and I hope he will share a whole bunch more when he talks about it. But one thing that he pointed out that I think is brilliant is if Maurice, the protagonist of this novel, desperately wants a child, that's one of the very few things that we're told about him, why did he seek out sexual and quote-unquote romantic relationships with men? The first 3 of them. What? That doesn't make sense. And sure, characters in books can do things that don't make sense, and that can deepen my interest in the narrative if they have a character. His character was so shallow. I couldn't hate him. He was a piece of paper with 3 adjectives on it. John Boyne tries to make this an interesting story, failing miserably by tacking on TV Movie of the Week issues, gay stuff, race, euthanasia, the Holocaust, interracial marriage, and hoping something will stick and make you think that he's telling a story that has some social value? What a load of crap. I would like to hear from German readers of this novel, because I thought the way that the story about the Holocaust was pretty questionable, and John Boyne has gotten into trouble before writing about the Holocaust. When will he learn? Because the one novel that he's written that's any good is one of my favorite books, The Heart's Invisible Furies. But whenever he ventures out into new territory, he ends up writing shitty books and pissing a whole bunch of people off. But I'm not going to speak about the Holocaust. I don't know. And I'm also not qualified to speak about race. But I have to tell you, I was pissed off that the wife in the middle section, she was black, but he gestured toward her racial otherness so lightly that I almost missed it. White writers are free to write about non-white characters, but don't do that. you don't know anything about race if you're going to write a non-white character in your story who's nobody comments on their race, nobody notices their race, they don't experience any racism, it's not part of the way they talk about themselves in that first-person narrative. That's just irritating. John Boyne, you piss me off. I also thought that there were a whole bunch of peripheral characters that had no business being in the novel. They didn't add anything. They just kept distracting the writer. By the writer, I mean John Boyne, from telling an interesting story. The supposedly black wife had a sister that was psycho. What was she doing in there? There's a scene that, one of the most annoying scenes in this book is a Christmas Day thing where the sister's ex-husband pays an unscheduled visit to see his kids during Christmas, and he puts a whole bunch of fucking comedy into that scene. What are we supposed to, is this a comedy? What is this? He had so little control over what this novel was that it didn't end up being anything. Ugh, just drove me up the wall. John Boyne in this novel is also inanely preoccupied by the smallest details where you think, oh, this must mean something. So one of them was, in part 1, the gay closet queen, who Maurice is seducing his life story out of, they're going touring around together, and that old German man, he's so fastidious about making the hotel reservations and making sure that their hotel rooms are placed side by side. But yet it never works out that they are. So I thought, oh, well, Maurice must have changed the reservation because he didn't want to get too close to this old queen. No, there's no reason for all the times where we are meant to suffer through passages as poorly written and stupid as this. Anxious that our rooms be located adjacent to each other, I sent a carefully worded request to the hotel 2 weeks in advance. Or later, I did my best not to look in the direction of the receptionist, with whom I had engaged in an earlier altercation upon discovering that Maurice's room would not be adjacent to mine, but located on the floor below. I had pleaded with her to make the necessary changes, but she had proved intractable, and I may have disgraced myself with a childish tantrum. I mean, it's just irritating because it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't mean anything, and it's not very well written. The other one that just made me so angry, because by this time it was all I could do to not puke all over this novel while I was reading. It was on page 287. This is the third and final, thankfully, final section. Our narrator is sitting with another guy in a bar, because by this time he's alcoholic. There's another TV movie of the week issue which doesn't fit his character because he has no character and it's just ridiculous and borderline offensive. And so Maurice trundles up to the bar. He's half pissed, and it's a bar that he regularly goes to. And then we get this. I made my way to the bar, where I ordered 2 more pints and focused my gaze on the girl behind the counter as she poured them. You missed a bit, I told her when she placed the drinks on the counter before me. I'm sorry. In the corner there, I said, pointing to a space behind her where a thick and sharp chunk of glass lay on its side, broken side up. From when you let the glass fall earlier. Oh, thanks, she said. I went back. Did we hear the glass fall? And then I kept that in my mind as I finished the book. Did that have any special meaning? What? Why? And where you let the glass fall? That reads like a Google translation from Polish. Like, what the hell? And the thing that made me the angriest, because John Boyne is supposedly a gay writer and he's including so much about gay literature. The protagonist is named after E.M. Forster's novel, and there's a puke-worthy scene with Gore Vidal. They're in Gore Vidal's library. This sexy young Maurice and Gore Vidal, who's an aging bitter queen, and he pulls off the shelf and displays proudly, opens to show Maurice a signed first edition of E.M. Forster's gay novel, Maurice. John Boyne has to give his toaster oven back because that's just ridiculous. E.M. Forster wrote it in 1915, revised it, I looked it up just to make sure. He revised it in 1932, and then he revised it again in 1959 and 1960. E.M. Forster died in 1970. Maurice was published posthumously the next year. There are no signed first editions! Okay, so to me this book read like a shitty first draft of a script for something like Dynasty in the 1980s. It was like so soap opera. And lots of people loved it. I hope you loved it. If you loved it and you have suffered through my rant, kudos to you. And if you are watching this not having read the book, I still think you should try it. But the only thing I can think positive to say about it is it's not the shittiest book I've read in 2019, but it's within the top 3. Thanks for watching.